Do you know why bones crack when we make those sudden movements? Do you know if it's good or bad to do it? I'll explain everything to you in this video. Because I'm sure you've wondered more than once what happens when your back cracks, when your vertebrae crack. I'll try to explain the physiological process that occurs and why that sound occurs. It's not that the bones are being put into place, no. It's not that they're colliding, or that, if the tendons are being dislocated, those things, no. What happens is that a joint has a natural, habitual, active range of motion. When I turn my neck, I reach here. I reach here. I have active ranges of motion, but then there's one more movement, a movement that can be reached passively, and it's the one that occurs in these mobilizations, in these manipulations that can be done by oneself or by a professional. Which makes a big difference. When you make that movement, what you're doing is surpassing this point, this range, and going a little further. So, what happens then? What happens when you go a little beyond the usual movement? What happens is that the joint has a space. Let's imagine a completely sealed room, right? Where we have a series of gas molecules that are dissolved in the joint fluid. There are small gas molecules that are dissolved, they are in a liquid state. When a gas is in a liquid state, it has less volume, it occupies less space. What happens? When we make this sudden movement, let's say it's like one of the walls moving, do you see? It has gone from here to here. What happens in this room? That now there is a greater volume, the room is larger, but the amount of fluid inside remains the same. No fluid enters from outside when we increase the volume of the joint. So, what happens then? To compensate for that negative pressure, because this is negative pressure, it's like if you take the air out of a jar, you're taking air out, you're generating negative pressure inside. What happens? These gas molecules that are liquid, occupying little space, will concentrate. All of them concentrate into a bubble, into what is called an implosion. An implosion is precisely the opposite of an explosion. The explosion goes from the center outwards, and the implosion, everything that is distributed, all those gas molecules, form a bubble. That collision of the molecules to form that bubble, that's what generates that sound, that kind of crunch. That's why you can only do it once. That's why if you do it on your finger, neck, or back, you can only do it once until the pressure decreases. The molecules will diffuse again, separate, and dilute back into the fluid because the pressure increases again, and then you can repeat the same maneuver and the same thing will happen, okay? We have already explained what happens physiologically with this gesture, with this sound. Why does the sound occur? Okay? Now let's try to understand whether it is good or bad to do it. Well, I'll tell you that both things, I'll tell you whether it's good or bad, depending. If you do it yourself, most of the time, if not 100%, it will be bad. Why? Because when you make those movements, what you do is mobilize those vertebrae that already have a lot of movement. Right? That simple sound when it's done is very easy to click. When we make that movement and a very simple click sound, it's not because we mobilized a vertebra that was rigid, we mobilized that vertebra that already had a lot of movement. So let's take the case of the cervical area C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, and C7. Right? We have the thoracic below, we already start to have stiffness towards the thoracic, the higher cervical area usually also has more stiffness. And we have these levels that are usually more hypermobile. They have a lot of movement. Why? Because whenever there is a level that has little movement, there is a level that has a lot of movement. So, when we make that gesture and click sounds very easily, it's sounding here, where there was already a lot of movement, we are mobilizing more of what already had a lot of movement. We are, in a way, promoting imbalance. It's like if we have in this case 2, 4, 6 children. Right? We have 3 children here who don't work and we have 3 children here who work, generally their own work and that of those above them. And what we do is, when I tense up and when the system is not working well, what I do is I lash out at the children who work to make them work more. In the short term, things work better. In the medium term, these children suffer, these children wear out. Here, it will be a source of osteoarthritis, a source of wear and tear. Hence the difference, because if a professional does these manipulations, not always and not everyone, because there is everything, right? There will be people who manipulate like this, roughly, and anything and any way. But a good professional who knows what he or she is doing in their manipulation work will manipulate those vertebrae that are hypomobile, those that have little movement, precisely with the idea of balancing the system between hypermobile and hypomobile areas, okay? That's why I was telling you that it's good, it's bad, it depends. If you do it yourself, almost always, I insist, you will do it in hypermobile areas. It will be negative. If a well-trained professional does it, they will do that manipulation in hypomobile areas and it will be positive. Well, with this, I think I finished the explanation about cracking. I hope the concept is clear to you now. I hope it helps you understand that you should not continue making those cracking movements, even if they seem to relax you and make you feel better in the short term, because you will need them more and more as time goes by, and the imbalance in your vertebrae will only get worse. It will only lead you to feel worse and worse. If you get through the withdrawal, you will notice that you need it less and less. Additionally, your cervical problems may even improve because the hypermobile area will become less hypermobile over time. Alright? Well, I hope it was helpful, enjoyable, and informative for you. In any case, I encourage you to search and find a lot of other videos with advice, explanations, exercises, self-massage, all of that, here, in OnSalus Health.